There we are. All right. And I guess we're not sharing our screen yet, so we share the screen. And we are off to the races. So there's a number of things that you violate when you fail to appear before a Beis Din. He quotes the Hilchos as saying, "Sha'adam hakovesh eduto ve'enu moed over al lo tamod al dam re'echa." You're also violating the law of do not stand by idly by your brother's blood. Ki hu roa mamon chavera oved uviyadu lahatzil de edus emes ve'eno matzia. Because you see that your brother's finances could be dissipating, and you do nothing to try and save him. Chen kasav sefer mitzvos laharambam shemi sheyichbosh et eduto techalalehu ha'azhara hazos shelo tamud al dam re'echa ki roma man chaver obed v'yachol hachzir elav b'omro emes. Rambam says the same thing, and the Sefer Achinuch writes the same thing. Aval yesh shekasvu she'isur shelo samud al dam re'echa lemisheinu meid shayachach b'dinei nefashos aval b'dinei mamonus havirak asmachta ba'alma. There are those who disagree and say that the Isser of Lo Tamud al Dam Re'echa is only when you could save someone's life. Let's say you can testify in a capital case, right, that this person is innocent, but not when it comes to just purely financial issues. Okay. Ulahalacha pasak achida bebirkei Yosef b'shem hatoras chesed shekofim al ha'ed lahaid kechol mitzvahs aseh shekofim al kiyuma. The Chida paskins that we do coerce a person to come and testify, just like any other mitzvahs aseh, where we force a person to comply if he flagrantly refuses. The poskim do disagree, however. What if I'm only one witness, and therefore, since I'm not joining together with another aide, I can't make a difference in the case because one witness's testimony is not accepted. And shehulo michayev mamon rak shavua, where in that situation, the most that I can do is obligate the person I'm testifying against to take a shavua. V'darshu chazal l'chol avon v'l'chol chatas lo kama b'al kamu l'shavua. Hayim hu over b'isr deraisim hu m'mayin lahaid. If I refuse to testify then, and this is especially true in nowadays when, generally speaking, Batei Din do not impose a shvua. Diladas harosh Yosef gam eid echad chayv lahaid mehatorah kivin shapamim rabos anit v'larotza liyishavam mishalem o shapamim mehalachat shel ha'ed shemakir b'shikro habal din moda u'mishalem. So this Sefer Rosh Yosef says that yes, even midioraisa you're obligated to testify as one witness because sometimes the pressure of having to take a shvua pushes the defendant to finally, tell the truth. Or he says, just the pressure of seeing the guy testify who knows you're lying, right? Having him come and testify in court, that in itself will push the guy over the edge. And he says, v'chein kosav hasma. See here. Oh, sorry. Sma she'ed echad chayv lahayd kevin shepamim hanitva lo rotza lihishavo mishalem al pi ha'ed. Okay, the same thing. Amnam yesh diktuku midivrei hagemar b'bava kama. So, however, some want to infer differently from the Gemara. The Gemara in Bava Kama says, "Ilema b'vei trei de oraisahu imlo yagid v'nasa avano ela b'chad." So without going into the whole context of the Gemara says if we can't be talking about two witnesses who are coming to testify, because that's a Torah obligation for two witnesses to testify. As it says, Im lo yagid ben asavano, if he does not inform, he will bear his sin. But rather we must be talking about one witness, which implies that one witness does not have a Torah obligation. Umashma lahejame hagmara de'edus eid echad lo havi midioraisa. V'chein mashma b'pirush Rashi sham shnei edim chayavim lahoid me'atorah kevin sheyesh b'kach edusam l'chayiv mamon. He says, and that's what Rashi says in his commentary to the Gemara. where he says that only two witnesses have a Torah obligation to testify because they can obligate the person to pay money. But since the most that one witness can obligate is a shvua, but he can't obligate money, his obligation to testify is only rabbinic. Even though he says, and even though imlo yagid is in the singular, implying that it's one witness, and that even one witness has a biblical obligation. No, the Gemara has already pointed out in Maseches Sota that anywhere where the Torah writes aid in the singular, it's really a reference to two aidim, not to one, unless the Torah says explicitly aid echad. The dafka sham shahatorah pirta echad, aval kol makom shekasuv aid stam pirusho shnayim. Kasuv hatumim de aid echad lo over mehatorah alav shalo im lo yagid. And therefore, in general, one witness is not in violation of the Torah law. So he says, and as far as the second question that we took up in this discussion, which is what if it's a relative? He's not kosher to be a witness, technically. But the two sides agree that they'll accept him. Okay? If he doesn't want to testify, even though his brother, who's one of the members of the conflict, what if he says, I accept my brother as a witness, even if he's going to testify against me? Right? Does that mean that he's now obligated to testify? In a bishut shvus Yaakov erech b'nosei zeh b'tzidei shuhu chayev kevin sheish to eles be'idu so. So the shvus Yaakov says yes, he is obligated because you'll make a difference in the outcome of the case. Omnam hatumim hevi mashakasav v'Yerushalmi le'inyan erechad shiskimu atzdadim sheyachashuv kishnei edim ha'im hu chayev lahayid olo. However, Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz in the Tumim brings the Yerushalmi that where the two sides agree to accept a karov's testimony, or let's say in this case they say that one witness is as powerful to us as two witnesses, and whatever he testifies, we will accept please accept him as if it's two witnesses testifying. Is he obligated to testify or not? Midioraisa. V'darash ha'Yerushalmi mehapasuk o ra'a o yada. And he infers from that Gemara, where the Gemara says over there that no, based on the verbiage of the pasuk, it's only if a person is kosher le'edus does he have this biblical obligation to testify. Because of hashumim tumim sham dehu adinim kiblu hadstadim aleim. Eitshu karavo pasul she'eno over midioraisa imninna milahayid. V'chein kasav b'birkei Yosef she'ed karavo pasul shekiblu habali din alehem ein olav shum edus v'lo chayv lahayid. He says, and the Birkei Yosef writes as well, he has no obligation. If he's summoned by the court, he has no obligation to testify. V'atamu shetzarach lios kosher bisman riyas ha'edus v'kan bisman ha'edus hu haya pasul ela shem kiblu oso alehem v'lochein lo over biser im mimayin milahayid. Now, what's the basis for it? The argument goes like this. The Torah says, O ra'a o yada, if you saw, O you know. And that implies that at the time that you saw what you saw to incriminate one of the claimants, you are kosher as a witness. If it's only after the fact, in other words, at the time when I saw my brother, let's say, steal money, I wasn't kosher as a witness. But then my brother, at the time of the Beis Din hearing, says, I accept my brother as a witness. That does not obligate me midioraisa to come and testify. There may be a rabbinic law. There may be an issue of do not stand idly by your brother's blood, right? There may be a mitzvah of hashavas aveda. Mikol Makom, he says, Yeshalav mitzvah lahoyed midin hashavas aveda, da'inu shiyasek kol yecholto la'achzer mamon libalo. But there's still a mitzvah of hashavas aveda, of returning some, if you have the ability to make a difference in the court case so that the correct party gets his money, so then you have an obligation to do so. Maybe not because of a formal Torah obligation of testimony, but because I have a mitzvah of hashavas aveda. If I know that I can make a difference, then I have an obligation to go to the court, which would also mean that, let's say, the Beis Din or the claimants don't even know that I know testimony, right? In other words, let's say I hear about a Beis Din case, and which he doesn't really address directly, but that would be the inference. The Beis Din is hearing a trial of where there's a plaintiff and a defendant, and the plaintiff doesn't have a strong case because he doesn't have any witnesses to the whatever, okay? But I happen to know because, let's say, I was the auditor for the company, and I know that the company that he's suing has scammed numerous, right? So which is a very kind of common thing. So I have a halachic obligation, not based on being a witness, but rather based on the mitzvah of hashavas aveda, that I have a mitzvah to notify the plaintiff. I just want you to know the company that you're suing is a dishonest company, and I would like to help you get your money back. That there's a halachic obligation there of hashavas aveda. Yeah.
Is Beis Din allowed to hear from a witness who's not permitted to be a witness, about a relative?
That's at the discretion of the Beis Din. If the Beis Din feels that this person's testimony is credible, they will allow a person to testify, but then will also utilize the halacha to say that we can't incriminate the party based solely on that person's testimony. But sometimes there's other, let's say, circumstantial evidence, and the Beis Din can sometimes base their judgment even when they don't have absolute testimony. If the Beis Din, I forget the language of the Gemara, but like, in other words, there's something called din meruma, where the Beis Din smells a rat. In other words, they know that someone is lying here, but they can't really put their finger on it based on actual evidentiary arguments, but they know that there's something wrong. Sometimes the Beis Din can rule on that basis. So if there's a preponderance of, let's say, circumstantial stuff that really leans against one party, they can rule based on that. Okay. Now, here's another, let's go on. Tam psul isha le'edus. Why is a woman pasul for edus? Okay, so especially in today's world, women are judges, women are witnesses, women are in every way in the social structure of our society today, women are extremely capable and are equals to men in all respects. Okay, so why is it that women are not accepted as witnesses in halacha? Okay, so what? They're too emotional, right? If the woke police were here, they would assemble a firing squad right? Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems to be the correct answer. I mean, as far as, look, anyone who was a witness to something always compiles what he saw in his mind. You always assemble things that you perceive in a backdrop of what's in your head, right? We all understand that, right? So a person's memory is only as reliable as their mental capacity. So and your memory can be tainted by your feelings. So, and we everyone recognizes that. Sometimes I'll give you a perfect example. You read an email, and depending upon your attitude towards the person who sent you the email, you either can read it as the person yelling at you or the person speaking to you softly, which is why, you never send an email or a text that is emotionally laced or that could be interpreted in different ways. But we superimpose our own attitudes towards an individual over things that we perceive in a very, very unemotional, just data perception. Okay, so let's see.
Because according to my kids, there's all these things you can do. Put a period at the end, or if you put it in capitals or something like that means in text and otherwise. And I have no idea.
Yeah,
I put
yeah.
a period because that's how I write. Well, what did you mean by that? Well, nothing really. Yes.
Right, which is why you shouldn't have those conversations by text.
Yeah.
Today, thank God, because of WhatsApp, you can leave a recorded voice message. Much better. Okay, so ma'atam shebeveistin lo mekablam edus isha. Why doesn't a Beis accept a woman's testimony? Harei amru Chazal shenasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu bina yetera bi'isha yoter miba'ish. Doesn't the Gemara say that God gave women a greater level of understanding than men? Bina yesera. Women understand the human condition better than men. I always defer to my wife in trying to figure people out. She's a much better judge of character than I am. Because women just generally they get people better. So, do you agree or you don't agree? No? Okay. It's especially important. Let's say you want to do business with someone and you have questions, just ask your wife. Okay. Atam shalom mekablim edus isha achol pishiyesh lahem bina yesera hu mishum shenemar betorah va'amdu shnei ha'anashim. The reason that we don't accept women's testimony, even though they have this bina yesera, is because the Torah says the two men shall stand before the judges. V'hagemara b'maseches shvuos ha'amida shebedubar be'edim dorshu anashim v'lo nashim. And the Gemara understands that it's talking about two witnesses and not the claimants themselves, but actually the witnesses. Even though you could interpret the pasuk as referring to the litigants and not to the witnesses, and they interpret the pasuk as saying it says anashim and not nashim. Because of Harambam, nashim psulos leedus mehatorah shenemar al pi shnayim edim lashon zachar v'lo lashon nekeva. And the Rambam similarly rules that women are pasul leedus midioraisa, because when the Torah talks about two witnesses, it speaks in the masculine conjugation, which is a little bit surprising. The Torah always defaults to masculine conjugation. In other words, if we were to say that, right, it says lo tamud al dam re'echa, do not stand idly by your friend's blood. So that doesn't apply to women. Okay. So it's a very very difficult Rambam to understand. V'hameforshim amdu al dvarav lama hevi pasuk acher meha pasuk shedarshu Chazal b'masecha shvuasham. The meforshim are puzzled as to why the Rambam brings a different pasuk from the Gemara. The Gemara understands it from the words v'amdu shnei ha'anashim. Why does the Rambam use the words v'amdu shnei al pi shnayim edim? He says that the Kesef Mishnah asks this question, and he says, and just in the notes, he says, "Afal pisha darko shel Rambam bekama mekamos lahavi pasuk acher mimasha Chazal darshu." He says, even though the Rambam does have a tendency to do that, he will sometimes bring a different pasuk as the source text for a halacha than appears in the Gemara. Kamo shekasav hayad malachi. He says that's only when the pasuk that is cited that the Rambam brings is more is more conclusive, is more indicative of the halacha. Aval hacha kasef hakesef mishnah sham shahapasuk shedarshu chazal yoter mevuar mishim dichtiv lahedya shnei anashim ve'al hapasuk shel Rambam kasha keven t'chol Torah b'lashon zachar ne'emer. He says the kesef mishnah's problem is, he says, why would the Rambam forsake the Gemara source where it says explicitly the word anashim, which usually means men, right? And bring instead a pasuk where it says al pi shnayim edim, but the Torah always defaults to the masculine. Kesef Mishnah sham heniach b'tzarachiyim, and the Kesef Mishnah, which is written by Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, says, I don't have a resolution for this. This is a tzarachiyim. But then he brings from the Chidushei Chasam Sofer, Shekosov liyashev de be'emes hapasuk shevi aramam shnayim edim hu hapasuk shemimenu darshu chazal denoshim psulos leidus. He says, really, the Rambam is correct. Chazal learned it out from the words al pi shnayim edim. V'diyuku kein mimashe b'chol haTorah kosov shnei edim v'hacha ksiv shnayim. Because really, the Torah, in more correct language, the Torah should have said al pi shnei edim. Al pi shnayim edim does not really fit grammatically. When the word to is going straight into to what, you don't say shnayim, you say shnei, right? It's only shnayim is when it's the object, it's not the right word. It's only when it's a standalone to. But if it's to something, you don't say shnayim, you say shnei. וההכרח לזה, דהמי הפסוק, ועמדו שני האנשים דרשו חז"ל בבבא בסרא למעוטי קטנים, ואיך דרשו בשבועס למעט נשים. And just to prove this point, Chassam Sofer says that in another Gemara, the pasuk of the Amdu Shnei HaAnashim, the two men shall stand before the judges, the Gemara in Bava Basra says Anashim is to the exclusion of minors. How then can the Gemara in Shavuos say that it's to the exclusion of women? Which one is it excluding, minors or women? Ela al korchach the ikar hadrasha hu mishnayim edim, v'hagmara naktes apostik shahadrasha pshuta yoter adkan tochen devarav. And really, so the Gemara was just using the words va'amdu shnei ha'anashim because it's more explicit there, but really the real drush is from the pasuk of the Rambam. He says, "Ulefi dvarav yotzei davar me'anyein." He says, according to the way that the Chassam Sofer explains it, it emerges that something very interesting is going on. The b'derech klal Chazal darshu et hapasuk ha'ikari v'harambam noket et hapasuk hayoter pashut lidrosh v'hacha zeh lehefech she'harambam katav et hadrash ha'ikarit v'Chazal naktu et hapasuk hayoter pashut lidrosh. Normally, the Gemara tells us the real pasuk. And when the Rambam changes the pasuk, it's because the Rambam wants to use a pasuk that is more explicitly getting across that point. But here, it's just the opposite. The Gemara is using the more explicit pasuk, and the Rambam is telling us the main source. So he goes into this discussion a little bit deeper. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'll tell you my own answer. The reason why the Rambam doesn't like this Gemara of the Amdu Shnei HaAnashim, because the simple understanding of the words V'amdu Shnei HaAnashim is referring to the litigants, not referring to the witnesses, right? And that's actually, if you look at the context, Dvarim Yud Tes Yud Zayin, I mean, we're sort of going afield from the halacha right now, but it's just quite interesting, this whole concept. Dvarim Yud Tes. So the pasuk over there is Ki yakum eid chamas beish la'anot bo sarah. That's okay. Ve'amdu shnei ha'anashim asher lahem hariv lifnei Hashem. So the two men who are having a dispute shall stand before the Elohim, shall stand before Hashem lifnei hakohanim v'hashoftim, asher yihu bayamim hahem, in front of the Hashem, in front of the Kohanim and the judges who will be in those days. Okay, yeah. So Asher Lahem Hariv that have the dispute. Okay, so to me that could be the reason why the Rambam wasn't happy, but it still doesn't explain how Al Pi Shnai Medim implies not a woman, because I mean, so there's a lot of mystery. We'll leave it at that, but just let's remember that there's a lot of mystery here as far as how you derive from Al Pi Shnaim Edim or Va'amdu Shnei Ha'anashim that women are puzzle for Edus. But it is something that is part of Torah Shabbat Peh, and regardless of which pasuk it is, women are puzzle min haTorah. Mikol makom mashma mikol zeh shenoshim psulos milahayd migzeras haTorah. What emerges, regardless of which pasuk it is that Chazal were unequivocal, and then he quotes in the footnote. He says, "V'chein kasav ba'arach hashulchan." He says, "Nashim va'avadim v'goyim psulim la'idus min haTorah v'davar zeh ein bo ta'am rak migzeras haTorah." The Aruch HaShulchan says there's no logical reason for this. There's no logical reason, but it is the Torah's decree. Now, if you learn it that way, now you can go home, Errol, and not get into a fight with your wife.
Yeah. Errol, just don't get too emotional. Let Sharon get too emotional.
Say, listen, honey, it's not up to me. I didn't make this law. It makes no sense to me. There's no logical reason why women should be pasul, but it's a gzeres hakasu. It's a divine decree. Okay. And that's what I would, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Okay. Okay. But the Sefer HaChinuch has a different approach. The Sefer HaChinuch writes, "Sha'atam shehem psulos la'edus umishum shenoshim da'atan kala." So now we're getting into trouble again. Okay. This is not the part you tell her. Okay, the reason the Sefer HaChinuch writes is because women's knowledge is light. Now, what exactly that means? The word kala is light, right? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, women were considered to be feeble-minded in the medieval world. Yeah. All right, we're going to continue this Amir Tzasham tomorrow. Okay. Take care.